Hello. My name is Freya. And 3 days after Thanksgiving, I evicted my own parents. Not because I lost control but because they never thought I had any. They called me the freeloader in front of 200 people, inside the house I paid for, maintained, protected. They laughed. Toasted. While I stood there, unseen, unheard, erased. But this wasn't just one cruel joke. It was years of quiet theft, money moved behind my back, trust documents rewritten, my legacy handed off like it never belonged to me. What happens when the invisible daughter finally draws the line? Are they still family once the truth is printed, signed, and delivered? Thanksgiving mornings have a certain rhythm in Asheville, coffee brewing before sunrise, the smell of butter and sage from the kitchen, and the faint hum of old jazz playing through the house. This year, my house carried that rhythm, only louder. Cars lined the gravel drive, voices overlapped, and laughter spilled through the screen door before I'd even finished setting the last plate. 200 guests. Every one of them here for a dinner that I paid for, cooked for, and planned for weeks, yet somehow I already knew I'd be invisible by dessert. The farmhouse looked beautiful. Fresh paint, trimmed hedges, the porch lights glowing like something from a postcard. My grandmother Inez would have loved it. She always said a house should feel like an embrace. Tonight, though, it felt like a stage, my family acting, and me standing off to the side, holding the script no one wanted to read. Mom, Vera, glided through the room, pearls shining against her sweater, greeting people as if she were the Queen of the Carolinas. Dad, Lowell, sat near the fireplace with a drink, nodding at the same 3 men he's known since the 80s. And Callista, my sister, the golden child, floated around, flawless as always, telling her colleagues how she grew up here, omitting that she hadn't spent a full summer in this house since high school. When I opened the door to greet a new wave of guests, I caught sight of my reflection in the glass, same dark hair, same tired smile. I'd spent the morning marinating turkey, arranging centerpieces, and double-checking the seating chart. No one asked me to, no one even noticed. I was just the quiet one who had time on her hands. Dinner started on time. The chatter swelled like a storm building. I moved from table to table, refilling drinks, answering questions, making sure the catering team didn't miss anything. No one seemed to remember it was my house. They just assumed my parents had organized everything. It wasn't worth correcting. When Vera stood up, tapping her glass with a fork, the room hushed. She had that voice, smooth, rehearsed, and practiced for attention. I just want to thank everyone for being here tonight, she said. We're so proud of this family, of all our accomplishments, of the love that holds us together. I was standing near the archway when Callista rose beside her, grinning like she was about to accept an award. Oh, and we can't forget to thank my baby sister, she added, raising her glass. Freya, the one who freeloads so quietly we barely notice she's here, but hey, she did let us use her house. The laughter came first as a ripple, then as a wave. Some chuckled politely, some laughed outright. I felt my stomach tighten, my skin flush hot, but I stayed still. People glanced at me, unsure if it was truly a joke or something sharper. Vera's smile never faltered. Oh, Callista, you're terrible, she said in mock reprimand, but her eyes didn't hold a hint of disapproval. Every noise in that room seemed amplified, the scrape of forks, the clink of glasses, the hollow sound of people trying not to look directly at me. I wanted to disappear, but this was my home, there was nowhere to go that wasn't already mine. Then I heard a voice from the far table. That's not fair, Vera. Freya's the only one who... It was Gloria, my neighbor. Her voice carried warmth and an edge of defiance. She'd been my grandmother's best friend and the kind of woman who believed truth should never whisper. Before she could finish, Vera cut her off with a saccharine tone. Gloria, we all have family matters, don't we? The smile she gave could have sliced glass. Callista giggled, pretending to hide behind her napkin. Around them, chairs creaked, guests shifted, pretending not to notice the tension. Gloria's mouth pressed into a thin line, but she said no more. I caught her eyes for a moment, apology, pity, something heavy sitting there, and I nodded once, silently thanking her for trying. I couldn't breathe. I excused myself, murmuring something about needing a refill, and walked through the crowd. Each conversation quieted as I passed, and then resumed the moment I was gone. The hallway was dimmer, cooler. My heels clicked against the wood floor like small declarations of freedom. Upstairs, I paused by the hallway wall lined with family photos. There it was, our portrait from years ago, taken in front of the house when the paint was still peeling. Callista in the center, hand on Mom's shoulder, Dad on her other side. I was at the edge, half hidden behind a fern. My face almost cut off. I stared at it until my vision blurred. In my bedroom, the noise downstairs was a distant hum. I sat on the edge of the bed, hands in my lap. My chest hurt, not from sadness but from the pressure of staying composed. On the shelf above my desk, there was a small, worn notebook, Grandma Inez's. I ran my fingers along its spine but didn't open it. I wasn't ready for nostalgia. I needed air, distance, anything but memories. I went to the window. The yard lights glowed against the night, cars parked neatly in rows. Laughter drifted through the open glass, faint but sharp. It wasn't my laughter. I had orchestrated a celebration I wasn't part of. I splashed water on my face, fixed my lipstick, and walked back downstairs. The clock read 9:30. Dessert plates were being passed around, the smell of pumpkin pie heavy in the air. I smiled at people out of habit. No one noticed the redness around my eyes. Freya, come sit, Vera called sweetly, patting the chair next to her. Her tone suggested forgiveness, though I hadn't done anything wrong. I took the seat but said nothing. They talked louder now, freer, emboldened by wine and applause. Callista was telling a story about a case she won, Vera bragging about her charity work, Dad laughing at some joke he didn't really hear. Their world spun effortlessly, powered by self-assurance and selective memory. I sipped my wine. One swallow, then another. The sweetness felt sour on my tongue. Camera flashes flickered, someone was taking photos for the local paper, capturing the perfect family gathering. I sat there, frozen in one frame after another, the smiling daughter who never quite belonged. A man from the church clapped Dad on the back. You're lucky, Lowell. 2 wonderful daughters, a beautiful home. Dad chuckled. Yeah, we've been blessed. His eyes didn't even flick toward me. I looked at my hands resting on the table, nails neatly trimmed, knuckles pale. I had paid for this entire night, every fork, every flower, every ounce of food, and yet I was the invisible guest. When people stood to make their goodbyes, they hugged Vera, shook Dad's hand, complimented Callista's speech. I received polite nods, the kind given to strangers at a bus stop. Gloria caught me by the doorway, touching my arm softly. Don't let them break you, honey, she whispered. Your grandma raised you better than that. I forced a smile. Thank you for coming, Gloria. Drive safe. After she left, the silence returned like a weight pressing against my chest. I started collecting empty glasses, stacking plates, wiping crumbs. It was a mechanical routine, a familiar way to stay grounded. Upstairs, the clock ticked past 10:30. From the living room, I heard Callista's voice again, loud, confident. You know, Mom, maybe next year we can host Thanksgiving at my place. It might be nice to give Freya a break from pretending. Laughter again. A smaller one this time, but sharper. I stood in the kitchen doorway, unseen, listening. I realized the sound that had haunted me all evening wasn't their laughter, it was my silence. I placed the last glass in the sink, turned off the lights, and headed back toward the staircase. Halfway up, I stopped and looked back at the dining room glowing below, full of people who would never see me for who I was. In my own house, I whispered, again. At the top of the stairs, I paused outside my bedroom door, one hand still on the knob. I wanted to cry, but I didn't. I was done crying for them. Instead, I went back downstairs, slowly, deliberately. The guests were gone now. Only family remained, buzzing around the kitchen, finishing leftovers. I poured myself another glass of wine and leaned against the counter. Mom looked up, her tone light. You disappeared on us. Everything okay? Perfect, I said. My voice didn't shake. Good, she replied, already turning away. I watched them move through my kitchen, laughing like nothing had happened. My hand tightened around the glass. For a moment, I considered saying everything, every insult, every theft, every forgotten favor, but what would it change? Words never mattered here. Only actions did. So I stayed silent. Observing. Memorizing. Every movement, every smirk, every lie hidden under polite laughter. When the clock struck 11, I walked out onto the porch. The cold air bit my skin, sharp and cleansing. The stars were bright, clearer than they'd been in months. Inside, I could still hear their voices, small, distant, fading with every second. I took one long breath and whispered to myself, steady and certain. I thought I'd reached my limit before. I was wrong. I thought I'd reached my limit before. I was wrong. The laughter downstairs hadn't faded, it rolled through the walls, thin and hollow, the kind of laughter that sounds practiced. I started up the stairs, slow and steady, my hand grazing the banister I'd sanded and stained myself last spring. Every step seemed to echo, though the music below had swallowed most other sounds. When I reached the top, I could still hear Callista's voice, bright, careless, as if she hadn't just carved a piece out of me with that toast. Halfway down the hallway, the smell of roasted turkey still clung to my sweater. I stopped beside the photo wall, a timeline of our family's greatest hits. Weddings, graduations, birthdays, all framed neatly, perfectly centered. My eyes found the picture from Dad's retirement party in 2017. The caption read, "Family First." Callista stood between both parents, one hand on Dad's shoulder, one around Mom's waist. My own face sat at the very edge, sliced almost out of view. You could see part of my hair, the outline of my smile, but not enough to matter. I stared at it longer than I should have. I couldn't tell if the cropping was an accident or a message, but I knew which one felt true. It was as if they'd wanted to erase me completely but didn't have the courage to finish the job. I whispered under my breath, "You couldn't even crop me out entirely. You had to leave just enough to remind me I never belonged." The house creaked, a sound of settling wood, and I realized how quiet it had become up here. The party below was muffled now, like hearing life from underwater. I turned toward my room and pushed open the door. The faint scent of cedar and lemon cleaner welcomed me. Everything was tidy, the folded laundry, the stack of books, the iron tablecloth I'd pressed for tonight's dinner still resting over the chair. I sat down on the edge of the bed, the fabric cool beneath my hands. For a long moment, I just breathed. I'd always been the quiet one, the peacekeeper, the fixer. The one who paid the bills without reminding anyone, who hosted without needing thanks. Tonight had turned that into something grotesque, a punchline delivered in my own kitchen. On the dresser sat Grandma Inez's old notebook, the corners frayed, leather cracked from years of use. I hesitated before picking it up. The lamp cast a small circle of light across the cover. I flipped it open and thumbed through the pages filled with her handwriting, curvy, graceful, always slanting upward, like she'd written with hope. Near the middle, a single page caught my eye. "They may silence you at the table, but you own the house the table sits in." Her words hit like a whisper and a warning all at once. My throat tightened. I could almost hear her voice, soft, patient, steady. I closed the notebook carefully, as if it were alive. Downstairs, someone burst into laughter again, followed by the clatter of silverware. I stood, walked to the mirror, and caught my reflection, the same calm face, the same composure that people mistook for weakness. It wasn't weakness. It was control. I turned off the lamp and stepped back into the hallway. From below, I could hear Vera's voice carry through the dining room. "Has anyone seen Freya? Did she leave already?" Callista answered before anyone else. "Probably upstairs sulking. You know how she gets, Cinderella complex." The sound of glasses clinking followed, then another round of laughter. I imagined their faces, Mom pretending to sigh with motherly patience, Dad shaking his head in mock concern, Callista basking in the attention. They had always been fluent in cruelty disguised as humor. I walked toward the stairs but didn't go down. Instead, I leaned against the wall and looked at the dining room from above. From this angle, I could see the table, lavish, crowded, and glowing under soft lights. One chair remained empty, my name written neatly on a place card that no one had moved. Freya Hartwell. The untouched chair stood like proof I'd been erased while still alive. Something inside me shifted. Not an explosion, not tears, something quieter, sharper. I went back into my room, shut the door, and sat at my desk. My laptop screen glowed faintly as I opened a folder labeled Home Documents. Dozens of PDFs filled the screen, mortgage receipts, payment confirmations, property taxes, all under my name. Proof of everything they refused to see. I looked at my reflection again in the dark glass of the window. It's not anger, I whispered. It's clarity. I unlocked a protected file I'd set up months ago, half forgotten until now. The cursor blinked at the top of a form, notice of termination of residency. It wasn't finished. I'd started drafting it years ago after one of Callista's visits, when she'd called me the charity case. Back then, I thought it was petty to hold on to something like that. Tonight, it felt like foresight. I sat there for a while, the hum of the printer faint in the background as I adjusted margins, filled in dates, cross-checked addresses. I worked slowly, methodically, the way I always do when I'm steadying myself. Downstairs, the music softened, replaced by low voices. The party was winding down. Through the vent, I heard Dad's tone, calm, paternal. She just takes things too personally. Always has. Mom replied, I know, Lowell. I try with her, but she never appreciates how much we do. And Callista, laughing softly, some people just like playing the victim. I hit print. The machine came alive with a mechanical hum. The sound filled the room, louder than any apology I'd ever wanted from them. I watched the page slide out slowly, crisp and clean. My name looked solid on that paper, undeniable. I folded it once, neatly, and slid it into a white envelope. My handwriting was steady as I wrote their names on the front. The ink bled slightly through the paper, as if the words themselves wanted permanence. For a long moment, I just sat there, listening to the faint crackle of the fireplace downstairs. I could picture the scene perfectly, Vera gathering compliments, Callista pretending humility, Dad finishing his drink, everyone basking in the illusion of a perfect family. The illusion had carried them this far. But illusions crumble when someone stops pretending to believe them. I stood, walked to the window again. The air outside shimmered with cold, frost had begun to form along the edges of the glass. The night sky stretched wide and indifferent. Somewhere beyond those clouds, Grandma Inez's stars burned steady, the same way they always had. I placed the envelope on the desk beside the closed notebook. The printer light blinked once and went dark. Downstairs, a chair scraped against the floor. Mom's voice drifted up, slurred slightly from wine. Where's Freya? Did she really go to bed without saying goodnight? Callista's laugh answered. Who knows? Maybe she's writing another list of grievances. The words didn't sting this time. They just confirmed what I already knew. I turned off the computer, the screen fading to black, leaving my reflection again, steady, unfamiliar in its calm. I whispered to it, not a vow, not a threat, just the truth of what was coming. They won't hear me shout. They'll hear me act. As I left the desk, the printer gave a faint creak, the cooling metal settling. The envelope remained where I'd placed it, white against the dark wood, unsealed but ready. I turned off the light, the room falling into quiet. The laughter below was distant now, fading like an echo from another life. I pulled the door halfway closed and paused, hand still on the knob, letting the silence settle around me. It wasn't the end of the night yet, but I already knew something irreversible had begun. One white envelope sat on the table, unsealed. The envelope was still there when I woke the next morning, lying on the desk like it had been waiting for me to open it. I didn't. Instead, I sat beside it with a cup of black coffee, watching sunlight spill through the blinds and stripe the page. The air felt heavy, full of unfinished thoughts. I had printed that eviction notice in a moment of sharp resolve, but now it stared back at me like a challenge. My eyes shifted toward the file cabinet in the corner, the one drawer I never touched unless I had to. I pulled it open, searching through folders until my hand landed on a thin yellow one labeled in my handwriting, 2019, Mom's Cataract. I'd written it years ago, tucked it away, and moved on, assuming it was just one of the many errands I'd handled for my family. I set the folder on the desk and flipped it open. Inside was a single document, creased down the middle, still smelling faintly of lemon cleaner. Across the top, in bold letters, Joint Account Access Authorization. I stared at the title, my heartbeat slowing. A memory surfaced. The kitchen, late afternoon. Mom had been stirring tea, humming a hymn under her breath. She slid the papers across the counter toward me. "Just sign this real quick, honey," she'd said. "They won't schedule my surgery unless we have a co-signer. You're the only one available. It's just procedural." At the time, I was answering an email from a client on my laptop, half listening, trusting her the way a daughter's supposed to. I glanced at the first page, saw her name, saw mine, saw nothing alarming, and signed where she pointed. She'd smiled that soft, practiced smile, the one she used on church committees and neighborhood fundraisers. "You always take care of me," she said, pressing her hand against my cheek before slipping the document into her purse. Back then, it had felt like love. Months later, Callista pulled up in a brand new SUV, sleek, white, with a red ribbon tied across the hood. I remember standing in the driveway, wiping my hands on my jeans after fixing the garden hose. "Nice ride," I said, trying to keep my tone light. "Big win at the firm." She grinned, all teeth and confidence. "Let's just say Mom's feeling generous lately." I'd laughed. "Generous, huh? Good to know cataract surgery comes with bonuses." She didn't flinch. Just smirked, tossing her hair over her shoulder before driving off. That night, I got an alert on my phone, a withdrawal of $31,000 from the account I shared with Mom for her medical bills. I remembered frowning, telling myself she must have made a transfer by mistake. I almost called the bank to check, but something inside me whispered not to. I didn't want to start another argument. I told myself it didn't matter, that money wasn't worth family peace. Now, 4 years later, the truth sat in front of me on the desk. I picked up the document again and read every line. The legal terms were sharp and unapologetic. Non-revocable transfer authority for asset dispersal. My own signature rested neatly at the bottom, clean and naive. I traced it with my fingertip, feeling the faint indentation in the paper. I wasn't helping, I whispered to the quiet room. I was being moved aside. The realization didn't bring anger right away. It brought stillness. That peculiar silence that comes right before a storm, when the sky hasn't decided whether to break open. I leaned back in the chair, staring at the ceiling. Downstairs, I could hear my mother's laughter on the phone. Probably talking to Callista, probably recounting last night's joke. The sound reached me like an echo through the floorboards. I turned back to the desk and opened my laptop. The folder labeled Archive/Evidence had been there for years, a habit from my work, where keeping receipts saved you from arguments. Inside were dozens of PDFs and spreadsheets, mortgage payments, electric bills, renovation invoices. I created a new sheet, typing across the top, household transactions, discrepancies. Row by row, I began filling in the truth. Medical account, joint access revoked. Home remodeling fund, 78% funded by me. Insurance refund, check redirected. Cataract transfer, $31,420, likely used for Callista's car. The list grew, line by line, every detail a memory, every number a small betrayal. My coffee went cold. The clock moved past 10, but I barely noticed. I stopped to rub my temples, remembering another scene, Vera at the bank, charming the teller while I filled out forms beside her. "She's so smart," she'd said, motioning to me, "I don't know what we'd do without her." The teller had smiled, and I'd smiled back, proud and stupid. When Inez was alive, she'd once told me, "Your mother collects people's good deeds like trophies, but she never pays the shelf space." I hadn't understood then. I did now. I saved the file, closed the laptop, and went to the window. The yard outside was covered in frost again. The sun had started to dip, light turning golden at the edges of the hills. The house was quiet, but it didn't feel peaceful anymore. It felt occupied, like I was hosting strangers. I thought about the past 4 years, about all the times Mom had said, "Family comes first." I realized she'd never meant me. I opened the drawer beside my desk and pulled out a smaller envelope, the kind used for checks. On the front, I wrote, "For record." I slipped the joint account authorization form inside. The paper made a faint sound as it slid in, a whisper of finality. Then I went downstairs. The kitchen smelled of coffee and leftover pie. Mom sat at the table with her phone, scrolling through social media. She didn't look up when I walked in. "Morning," she said casually. "You disappeared early last night. Everything okay?" I took a breath, steady. "Yeah. Everything's fine." "Good. Your sister's post from the party's blowing up. Over 200 likes already." I looked at the phone screen. A photo of Vera, Callista, and Dad, arms around each other, smiling, the caption, "Family first. Thankful for every blessing." No mention of me. I turned to the sink, rinsed my mug, and said nothing. Later that afternoon, when she went out for errands, I returned to my room and reopened the laptop. The spreadsheet stared back, waiting. I added one more line, "Public humiliation, Thanksgiving 2023. Under cost, I wrote, "Self-respect. Pending recovery." The simplicity of it made me laugh once, quietly. Then I straightened in my chair and opened my email. I typed a new subject line, "Formal notice of financial review." For the first time, I didn't hesitate to write to my attorney friend, David. He'd helped me set up the trust after Grandma died. I explained, briefly, what I'd discovered. His reply came within minutes, "Send copies of everything. We'll start with the account authorization. Don't tell them yet." I attached the files, one by one, hands calm and precise. Each click felt lighter. As evening fell, the lights from the living room glowed through the hallway. I heard the garage door open. Mom was home. I closed the laptop gently and leaned back. My reflection in the screen didn't look like someone defeated. It looked like someone finally seeing the full picture. For years, I'd believed helping them was an act of love. It wasn't. It was consent to be erased. I reached for the notebook again, the one from Grandma Inez, and opened it to a blank page. I wrote a single sentence, "Love doesn't mean silence." Then I tore the page out, folded it, and tucked it into the envelope with the document. I sealed it this time. Her face hardens. She takes out a fireproof envelope marked, "Just in case." I didn't remember labeling it that way, not exactly. But there it was, tucked in the back of the drawer under my tax folders, beside a thumb drive marked, "Dad's 2018 will," and a few old birthday cards I never had the heart to throw away. My fingers brushed the surface, then closed around it with a steadiness that surprised me. I brought it over to the desk and laid it beside the sealed envelope from the day before. The house was still. I could hear only the faint tick of the old mantel clock downstairs and the groan of the floorboards as the furnace kicked on. I turned on the small desk lamp, careful not to wake anyone. The yellowed light spilled across the wood, softening the edges of the papers. I opened the envelope. Inside was a collection of receipts, emails, and scanned documents. Some I barely remembered printing, like the bill from the contractor I never hired. I read through it slowly. The invoice was for a roof replacement, dated last April, signed by Vera. The contractor's name didn't ring a bell. I'd never hired him. I hadn't even known the roof was touched. The total was over $19,000. My credit line was listed as the billing source. I sat there for a moment, letting the information settle into my bones. I didn't shout. I didn't even blink. I just stared at the line that said, "Final payment received, authorized by Freya Hartwell." Only I never authorized anything. Next, I turned to my email. I rarely checked the old shared family account anymore, but curiosity, or maybe instinct, nudged me to log in. As soon as the inbox loaded, a new message blinked into view, marked Sunroom Fundraiser. The email was from someone at the church, CC to my mother, with a subject line that read, "Donation thank you letter for tax write-off, addressed to Vera Hartwell." The body of the message was short. "Thanks again for using Freya's credit, hope the new sunroom turns out great. We'll have the plaque installed in time for Easter brunch." My name wasn't mentioned beyond the financial reference. No thank you. No acknowledgement. Just my money. And Vera's name on the donation wall. I stared at the screen until my vision blurred. Then I stood and walked to the kitchen, trying to quiet my heartbeat with the distraction of brewing coffee. The scent filled the room, grounding me, but my mind was anything but calm. I remembered the brunch last spring, when Vera had friends over from the church and the women's club. I was in the kitchen, washing dishes, as she laughed with them in the sunroom, telling them, "This house has been in our family for generations. My grandmother built it, my children grew up here. I take care of it now, of course." I chuckled quietly back then, thinking it was just another harmless exaggeration. But now, with these receipts in front of me, it didn't feel harmless anymore. It felt like theft, slow, casual, and veiled in southern politeness. By the time the sun was up, the house had started to stir. I heard Vera's door creak open, followed by the soft shuffle of her slippers. She made her way to the kitchen and stopped short when she saw me at the table. "Morning," she said, her tone too chipper, like she was playing a part. "Didn't expect you to be up this early." "I never went to bed," I replied. She hesitated, then poured herself a cup of coffee. "Something on your mind?" I slid the invoice across the table to her. She glanced at it, then took a slow sip from her mug. "Oh, that," she said. "Yes, we had to fix the roof last spring. It was leaking near the sunroom. I thought you knew." "I didn't," I said calmly. "And I didn't authorize this. We're family, Freya. Don't be petty. We all contribute where we can." I leaned back in the chair, arms crossed. "No, Mom. I paid. You signed my name." She put her mug down carefully. "It's not like you couldn't afford it. That's not the point." Before she could respond, Callista walked in, still wearing silk pajamas and her usual smug expression. "What's going on?" she asked, already pouring almond milk into a glass. "Your sister thinks she's being robbed," Vera said with a sigh. "I didn't say that." My voice was flat. "I said my accounts are being used without my consent." Callista raised an eyebrow. "Seriously? You're going to make this about money?" "No," I said. "I'm making it about respect." Callista laughed. "Good luck getting that." She took a sip of her drink, then walked out like she hadn't just stepped on my spine. Vera gave me a long look, one I couldn't quite read, part challenge, part pity. "Don't start something you can't finish," she said. I didn't answer. Later, after the house had settled again into its quiet rhythm, I returned to my room and opened my laptop. I typed one line into a blank document. "Should I go legal?" The cursor blinked beneath the question, like it was waiting for me to grow a spine. I stared at it for a long time, then closed the laptop without saving. I opened the drawer, pulled out the fireproof envelope again, and added the invoice and email printout. Then I sealed it shut. This wasn't just about one invoice or one signature. It was about a pattern. A system. A family that treated my life as a backup plan and my finances as their safety net. I wasn't angry anymore. Anger would have been easier. I was awake. The fireproof envelope sat on my desk all night, its label catching the early light like a silent dare. When dawn came, I carried it downstairs to the kitchen, setting it beside a neat pile of unpaid utility bills and the folder marked mortgage, 2018 to 2024. The clock over the stove read 6:48 a.m. The air smelled faintly of coffee and burnt toast, a familiar scent that had long stopped meaning comfort. I sat at the kitchen island, opened my planner, and began sorting through the numbers, electric, water, insurance, all the things that somehow no one else in this house ever saw fit to touch. My pen moved with mechanical precision, line by line. I had learned years ago that anger wasn't productive until it was organized. The back door creaked. Dad, Lowell, entered, wearing the same navy sweatshirt he wore every morning. He poured coffee without a word and leaned against the counter, glancing at the papers spread across the table. "You're up early," he said finally. "I never really went to sleep." He grunted, took a slow sip, and waited for me to say more. I didn't. After a long silence, I asked, "Dad, do you really believe I haven't contributed anything to this family?" He looked up, startled by the directness, then shrugged. "You live here. You always have. You didn't build this house, Freya. You didn't raise a family in it. You help around, sure, but it's not the same thing." I studied his face, the lines etched deep from years of work, the pride that once made me admire him. It hurt, even now, to see how easily he dismissed me. "I didn't build it," I said quietly, "but I paid for everything that keeps it standing." He frowned. "You're exaggerating." I didn't argue. Instead, I reached for the folder on my left, opened it, and slid it across the counter. "Look." Inside were copies of receipts, roof repairs, utilities, taxes, even the check that had covered the new flooring Mom wanted. Each document bore my name. "You haven't paid a cent in 5 years," I said. My tone was calm, almost gentle, like explaining arithmetic to a stubborn student. He looked through the papers, his brow furrowed. "You're overreacting. This is family. It's all ours." I nodded once. "That's what you keep saying. But family doesn't mean free labor. Family doesn't mean one person pays and the rest pretend not to see it." He set down his mug a little too hard. Coffee sloshed onto the counter. "Don't start acting like a victim. We've given you everything, this roof over your head, the car you drive, food on the table." I took a slow breath, steadying the tremor rising in my throat. "You didn't give me this roof, Dad. Grandma did. You didn't buy the car, I did. And the food. I've paid for that, too. I've worked every day since college to make sure this family had enough, and all it got me was a seat at the end of the table and a joke with my name on it." He looked away, jaw tightening. "You're twisting this." "No," I said softly, "I'm remembering it correctly." The refrigerator hummed. A faint draft slipped through the window, carrying the smell of cold rain. I wanted him to understand, to see me the way I saw him when I was little, strong, dependable, honest. But that man was long gone, replaced by someone too proud to admit the truth. "Don't turn into one of those bitter people," he said finally. "You know the kind. Always complaining about what they didn't get instead of being grateful for what they have." I met his eyes. "Gratitude doesn't require blindness." "I'm not bitter, Dad. I'm awake." For a second, I thought he might apologize. His mouth opened, then closed again. Pride won, as it always did. He took another sip of coffee and muttered, "You've changed." "Good," I said. "It's about time." Footsteps echoed down the hall. Vera appeared in her robe, hair wrapped in a towel, the faint smell of her expensive lotion following her like perfume. "What's all this?" she asked, eyeing the papers. "Your daughter's having a meltdown," Dad said without turning. I didn't look at her. "I'm done being used." Vera sighed dramatically, reaching for a mug. "Freya, must you always make everything sound so serious? You know your father hates confrontation in the morning." I gathered the papers into a stack and tucked them back into the folder. "If this continues," I said evenly, "I'll take steps. And I won't warn again." Dad gave a short, humorless laugh. "You don't have it in you." Something in me snapped, not loudly, not visibly, but like a door closing quietly from the inside. I pushed back the chair and stood. "You'll find out." The look on his face told me he thought I was bluffing. Maybe once, he would have been right. I left the kitchen, folder in hand, and climbed the stairs slowly, my pulse steady. At the landing, I stopped to look back at them, Mom pouring sugar into her cup, Dad pretending to read the newspaper. They didn't look like villains. They looked like two ordinary people pretending they hadn't done anything wrong. In my room, the morning light had softened into a pale haze. I set the folder on the desk beside the printer and opened the drawer again. Inside was a new manila envelope labeled in block letters, "Notice, prepared." I'd printed the forms weeks ago, before the party, before everything. Some part of me must have known this day would come. I pulled the envelope out and ran my thumb over the edge. The paper felt smooth, almost cool to the touch. My reflection shimmered faintly in the dark screen of the laptop across the desk. "He's wrong," I said aloud, voice barely above a whisper. "I do have it in me. And now I have a reason." The sound of rain began tapping lightly against the window, steady and rhythmic. It calmed me. I placed the envelope neatly beside the printer, aligning the corners like a ritual. Then I sat down and watched the inkjet light blink awake, the hum low and familiar. There's a point in every story where pretending ends. I could feel mine approaching, slow, deliberate, unstoppable. Downstairs, I heard Mom's laughter again, then the clink of plates as she began making breakfast like nothing had happened. Life went on, the same facade repeating itself, but the spell had broken for me. This wasn't just about bills or names on documents anymore. It was about dignity, something they'd mistaken for weakness all these years. I reached for my phone and opened my contact list, scrolling past old coworkers, friends I hadn't called in months, until I landed on one name, David Green, attorney. My thumb hovered over the screen, not ready to press call. Not yet. Instead, I took a deep breath, letting the smell of rain drift in from the open window. Then I whispered the same words I used to tell myself before every major decision in life: move quietly. But move. I shut the phone off and leaned back in the chair, the soft rustle of paper the only sound in the room. Outside, thunder rolled far away, barely audible. Inside, the storm had already begun. She places a manila envelope labeled, "Notice, prepared," next to the printer. The morning air was crisp enough to sting. I could see my breath rise in faint clouds as I stepped out onto the porch, the manila envelope tucked beneath my arm. The sun hadn't yet burned through the thin mist that settled over the valley, and the world felt muted, as if holding its breath with me. The label on the envelope was clear and unapologetic: "Notice of termination of residency, 14 days. Beneath it, the legal seal gleamed faintly in the light. No signature, no emotion, just the date. I walked down the gravel path toward the mailbox. My boots crunched softly over the stones, each step deliberate. I could smell the sharp bite of pine from the trees that framed the property. When I reached the end of the drive, I paused. It wasn't hesitation, just acknowledgement. A quiet farewell to the woman who would have second-guessed herself. I opened the metal box, slipped the envelope inside, and shut it gently. The sound was small, but final. The kind of sound that changes everything, even if no one else hears it. By noon, the house was alive again. The faint hum of the dishwasher, the smell of coffee, Vera humming under her breath while arranging flowers at the dining table, as if it were any other Sunday. I was upstairs, reviewing a few work files, when I heard the sharp slam of the back door. Her voice followed, brittle and disbelieving. "Freya. What is this?" I came down the stairs slowly, already knowing what she held. She stood in the middle of the kitchen, the opened envelope trembling in her manicured hand. "What's a joke?" I asked. "This," she snapped, waving the paper. "This eviction notice." "It's not a joke," I said, steady. "You're being asked to leave. Legally." For a second, she didn't speak. Then she laughed, a high, nervous sound that cracked halfway through. "You're evicting your own parents. Have you completely lost your mind?" Before I could respond, the speakerphone on the counter chimed. Callista's voice filled the room, sharp as ever. "What's going on over there? Mom says you've lost it." I picked up the phone, holding it close enough for her to hear my voice clearly. "I haven't lost anything," I said. "Except my patience." You can't do this, she hissed. You're going to humiliate our family. Do you have any idea how this looks? I smiled, though she couldn't see it. Like accountability. Vera slammed her hand on the counter. Freya, stop this right now. You're not thinking straight. We're family. You can't just throw us out. I didn't throw anyone out, I said quietly. I gave notice. 2 weeks. You can take your time packing. Don't talk to your mother like that, my father's voice boomed as he entered the room, coffee mug in hand. His tone was heavy with authority he no longer earned. He looked at the paper, then at me. You think a piece of paper changes this house? This family? It doesn't change anything, I said. It reveals everything. He slammed his mug onto the counter, coffee splashing across the marble. You're out of line. Vera turned to him, near tears now. She's trying to ruin us. Ruin you? I said. I've been keeping you afloat. The roof over your head, the bills, the property taxes, all of it has my name on it. You should have thought about that before you made me the punchline of your dinner party. Callista's voice rang out through the phone again. Freya, listen to yourself. You sound unhinged. This isn't about money, it's about ego. I stared at the phone. Then you must know what that feels like, Callista. She gasped softly, then hung up. Dad took a step toward me, his jaw tight, his eyes dark. You're going to regret this. We've given you everything you have. I held his gaze. No, Dad. You taught me to survive. Everything else, I earned. Vera's face twisted. You're going to be alone, Freya. No one will stand with you. I've already been alone, I said. At least now, I'll have peace. For a moment, no one moved. The only sound was the slow drip of coffee from the edge of the counter onto the tile. Dad's breathing grew louder, heavier, until he took one quick, angry step forward. Don't, I warned. He froze. I lifted my phone from my pocket and held it up. Already recording. Try me. The words hit him harder than any shout could have. He stopped mid-step, nostrils flaring, chest rising and falling in short bursts. For years, his presence had filled this house like a storm cloud. Today, he looked smaller. I lowered the phone, turned my back to them, and walked toward the door. My hands didn't shake. Where are you going? Vera shouted after me. To work, I said simply. Someone has to pay for this place while you still live here. The door closed behind me, muting her protests. I walked to my car, the cool wind cutting across my face. The sky had turned pale gray, the kind that warned of rain but didn't yet deliver it. I sat inside for a long minute, breathing in the silence that lived outside their chaos. Later that night, the house was quiet. I returned after sunset to find the lights off, the smell of dinner long gone. My parents' bedroom door was closed. From inside, I could hear muffled voices, Vera crying, Lowell's low baritone trying to soothe her. For once, I didn't care to listen. I went upstairs, powered on my laptop, and stared at the blank screen until my reflection appeared. My face looked calm, too calm. The kind of calm that comes after a storm finally hits. I opened my email, typing slowly but deliberately. To David Green, attorney. Subject, eviction notice delivered. Body. The notice was sent and received. Please proceed with the next steps as we discussed. I clicked send. The faint sound of the whoosh as the email left my outbox felt like a gunshot muffled by distance. I stared at the screen, watching my reflection hover there, a woman I barely recognized, but finally respected. This wasn't vengeance. It was correction. I shut the laptop, leaned back in the chair, and let out a breath I hadn't realized I'd been holding since Thanksgiving night. Downstairs, I heard the faint creak of a floorboard, my father pacing, maybe. My mother whispering. The sound didn't bother me anymore. I had finally stopped waiting for them to understand. Her face in the screen's reflection, calm, deadly focused. By the time the sun was fully up Monday morning, I already knew something had shifted. The air felt taut, like a violin string pulled just a hair too tight. I was halfway through my first coffee when the notification started. One chime, then two. Then they came faster than I could check. At first, I thought they were just work emails. But the subject lines told me otherwise. Is this you? You okay? This video is everywhere. I clicked the first message. A link to a Facebook video. No caption. Just a freeze frame of Callista mid-toast, smirking, her glass raised. I tapped the play button. There it was, Thanksgiving night. My living room. My table. My sister's voice, syrupy and gleeful. And let's thank Freya too, the one who freeloads so quietly we barely notice she's here, but hey, she did let us use her house. The camera shook from laughter. Someone muttered, savage. Another voice whispered, ouch. Then it cut out. Underneath, the video was captioned, Thanksgiving burn, family drama in real time. It had already been shared over 3,000 times. My jaw clenched. I didn't cry. I didn't even flinch. I watched it twice, then set the phone down. The internet had finally been invited to dinner. By noon, my voicemail was full. Half the messages were from people I hadn't heard from in years, former classmates, extended cousins, neighbors who'd long since moved away. Some were concerned. Some were just curious. A few were clearly entertained. But then came the shift. At 12:42 p.m., Vera posted a statement on her Facebook account. The tone was soft, polished, exactly what she used at church potlucks when she needed to calm a room without admitting fault. I'm heartbroken that a private family joke was taken out of context. We love Freya deeply, even when she chooses to isolate herself. Families go through hard times. Ours is no different. Callista followed 15 minutes later. A picture of Vera and Lowell on the couch, Mom's head in Dad's lap, both looking devastated. Her caption read, my parents are being harassed over a joke. Be better, people. By 1:30, the comments turned. She's trying to go viral off her family's pain. Ungrateful millennial. She lives in their house and treats them like enemies. Clout-chasing daughter evicts aging parents. Disgusting. One message read, you're going to kill your mother over internet fame. Another, if you had an ounce of gratitude, you'd be ashamed. I didn't reply. I didn't post. I didn't scream into the void. Instead, I opened a folder on my desktop and found the full recording, the one taken from the hallway security camera. It captured everything from the start, the setup, the smugness, the laugh track at my expense. No edits. No cuts. Just the truth. I wrote one line. This was the context. No edits. Make of it what you will. Then I emailed it to a local community blog run by a woman named Elise, someone I'd met years ago at a nonprofit event. She wasn't flashy, but she had reach. And integrity. Within 2 hours, she'd posted it. The second wave came fast, and it was different. This is disgusting. She paid for that whole dinner. You can see how uncomfortable she is. They mocked her in her own home. This isn't a joke. She handled this with more grace than I ever could. People started defending me, strangers, mostly. One woman said, I hosted Thanksgiving in my own home last year. If my family had said that to me, I would have thrown the pie at them. Another commented, this feels way too familiar. I felt a strange kind of peace, not validation, exactly, but clarity. I hadn't been crazy. I hadn't imagined the sting. And yet, the calls kept coming. Angry voicemails from Vera's friends. Judgmental texts from church members. My Aunt Rachel left a 4-minute message telling me how disappointed she was, finishing with, this will break your father. But the one that hit hardest came from my cousin Alan. A quiet guy. Never took sides. His message was just one sentence. You used to be the kindest person I knew. I stared at that text for a long time, then deleted it. Later that night, I received a message from Callista. Hope your internet fame feels worth it. I mean it. You've destroyed everything for what? Sympathy. Good luck being alone in that big old house. I replied with one sentence. Truth isn't fame. It's freedom. No emojis. No punctuation tricks. Just words I meant. I thought that was the end of it, until the doorbell rang at 8:16 p.m. A FedEx delivery. Overnight express. The envelope was thick, heavier than expected. My name written cleanly on the front, the return address familiar. Marshall. I hadn't spoken to him since last Christmas. My mom's nephew, sharp-eyed and always polite. I used to trust him, once. Inside was a sealed flash drive and a letter, notarized and official. Attached to the front was a sticky note. Thought you might need this. Love. Marshall. I sat down at the dining table, now cleared of all remnants of Thanksgiving. The chair opposite me, the one Vera had occupied when she toasted me like a joke, stood empty. I held the flash drive between my fingers, feeling its weight. Not physically. Emotionally. Because whatever was on it would change something. And whatever had once tethered me to silence, it wasn't strong enough anymore. Freya stares at it, her jaw tightens. I didn't move for a full minute. The flash drive sat between my fingers, small and ordinary, yet it pulsed with a weight that made my chest feel tight. My jaw was clenched so hard it ached. I reached for my laptop, plugged it in, and waited for the files to open. There were 3 folders. The first was labeled trust_amendment_2020, the second supporting_docs, and the last, notes_from_Indira. I clicked the first. The document that filled the screen looked like any other legal form, dense paragraphs, clauses, signatures. But then I saw it. Line 21, primary beneficiary, Callista Hartwell. My name had been replaced. The date of modification. A week after my grandmother Inez's funeral. The signature beside the amendment read Indira Patel, witness/financial advisor. I leaned back in my chair, staring at that line until the letters blurred. My fingers tightened on the edge of the desk. So it was never about me, I whispered. It was always about keeping me out. I opened the second folder. Copies of emails, scanned correspondence between Indira and Vera. Words like reallocation, simplify asset flow, and avoid unnecessary complications with Freya. Every word felt like a slow incision. In one email, Indira wrote, "We'll finalize the trust transfer by next week. Best to make it look procedural, Freya won't even notice. She's too trusting." My stomach turned. The audacity wasn't what shocked me, it was the casualness. Betrayal dressed in polite language, the kind that people like my family had mastered. I closed the laptop halfway, just enough to see my reflection in the screen. I looked calm, but my pulse was a hammer in my throat. When I finally stood, it was almost dark outside. The sky hung low, heavy with storm clouds. I went to the hallway console, pulled out the small key for the security system's archive, and unlocked the panel. The hard drive slid out with a faint click. I carried it to my room and connected it to my laptop. The folders loaded instantly. Dates, timestamps, hundreds of recordings from around the house. I scrolled to Thanksgiving Day, found the one marked 8:17 p.m., and pressed play. The image was grainy but clear enough. The kitchen, just after dinner. Mom, Vera, stood near the counter, a glass of wine in her hand. Callista leaned against the fridge, shoes off, feet bare. Vera's voice filled the room. "She's lucky we let her live here. I'm telling you, Callista, once we get everything signed over, she's gone." Callista laughed softly. "Just nod when she talks. Let her think she matters." I paused the video. For a long time, I couldn't breathe. I played it again, this time from the start. I listened to every word, every giggle. Halfway through, I realized I was crying, silently, no shaking, just tears falling faster than I could stop them. When the clip ended, I replayed it a second time. This time, I didn't cry. I just sat there until the tears dried on my face and anger settled into something colder. The next morning, I sent a text message to the family group chat. Meeting at the house tonight. Non-negotiable. By 7 that evening, they arrived one by one, Vera first, in pearls and perfume, trying to appear composed. Lowell followed, scowling but silent. Callista walked and lashed, her phone in hand, scrolling without looking at me. Aunt Indira showed up 10 minutes late, apologizing like a lawyer late to court. I didn't offer coffee. I didn't ask them to sit, but they did anyway, spreading out across the couch and chairs like they owned the space. Freya, Vera began, her voice sugar-coated. This whole spectacle, posting videos, humiliating us, what do you think it accomplishes? I didn't answer. Instead, I connected the laptop to the TV. The screen flickered, then filled with the paused image of her standing in that same kitchen, wine glass in hand. Let's see what you think, I said. I hit play. The room went silent. Every word echoed. The recording ended. Vera's face drained of color. Lowell shifted uncomfortably, rubbing his knee. Callista crossed her arms, pretending boredom. Indira cleared her throat, but no one spoke. Then I placed a stack of papers on the coffee table, copies of the trust documents, printouts of the emails. You had no right, I said quietly. You manipulated the estate, erased me, and forged an entire narrative about who deserved what. Indira's voice was careful, professional. Freya, sweetheart, you're misunderstanding. Don't patronize me. My voice was steady, sharper than I expected. The dates, the signatures, the money trails, they don't lie. You did this after Grandma's funeral, while I was still planning her memorial. You thought I'd never find out. Vera found her voice first. You ungrateful child. After everything we gave you. I cut her off. You didn't give me anything. You took everything you could and made me feel guilty for not thanking you faster. Callista scoffed. You think the internet makes you powerful? You're just sad. A sad woman desperate for attention. I turned to her, smiling faintly. Funny. I thought the trust fund made you powerful. Looks like we were both wrong. Lowell slammed his hand on the armrest. Enough. We're not doing this in front of outsiders. I laughed once, low and humorless. Outsiders? You mean Indira? The one who rewrote Grandma's trust so my name disappeared overnight. Indira stood up, flustered. Let's be reasonable, Freya. There's no need to. Reason. I snapped, grabbing the last page of the document and slamming it onto the table. Reason died when you erased me from my own legacy. No one moved. The silence that followed was heavier than any shouting could have been. I stepped back, my hands shaking, not from fear, but adrenaline. Your access to this home ends in 48 hours, I said. Legal action is already in motion. And next time you think about using my name for anything, remember this conversation is recorded too. Vera's eyes filled with fury. You'll regret this, Freya. I already regret not doing it sooner. For a long time, no one spoke. Then, quietly, Lowell muttered, You've changed. I looked him straight in the eye. No, Dad. You just stopped recognizing me. I walked to the door. The sound of my heels against the floor was the only thing breaking the stillness. When I reached the entryway, the doorbell rang. A courier stood outside, rain dripping from his jacket. Delivery for Freya Hartwell, he said. I signed the slip, took the envelope, and turned back toward the room. Their faces were still frozen in disbelief. Those, I said, holding up the envelope, are for you. They stared at me, confused, until they saw the return address, Buncombe County Superior Court. Vera gasped. You filed. Correction, I said. I finalized. I handed the papers to the courier to deliver directly, as procedure required. Then I turned back to them, my voice calm, almost gentle. You taught me that family means responsibility. I'm finally holding you to it. I stepped outside and closed the door behind me. The sound echoed against the porch walls, a single, final note. The rain fell harder, drumming against the wood, washing the last traces of their voices away. Closes the door without looking back. The door clicked shut behind me with a quiet finality. I stood on the porch for a moment, letting the rain touch my skin like a benediction. There was no satisfaction in that last exchange. No victorious high. Just stillness. 2 days later, the house was empty. I walked room to room barefoot, not because I needed comfort, but because I needed to feel the floor, the space. I needed to claim it in a way I never had when they were here. The guest bedroom still smelled like lavender. Vera's sheets were folded neatly at the foot of the bed. She had even dusted the windowsill, like she couldn't quite leave without performing one last act of control. I ran my hand across the fabric. It was soft. Too soft. In the hallway, I passed by the old photo wall. Several frames had been taken down. I stood where they used to hang, staring at the empty nails. For years, this house was never mine, even though the deed said otherwise. Now, for the first time, it truly was. I paused in the doorway of my bedroom, not ready to enter just yet. Instead, I sat at the top of the stairs, knees drawn up, arms wrapped loosely around them. The house creaked and shifted like it was exhaling. Then I stood, walked slowly to my nightstand, and pulled open the drawer. Inside lay the old leather-bound notebook, Grandma Inez's. I hadn't touched it in weeks, not since I started printing court motions and scanning betrayal into PDFs. I opened it to the back, letting the pages fan through my fingers until one near the very end caught my eye, one I didn't remember seeing before. Her handwriting was unmistakable. Looped, careful, and still confident even in old age. Legacy isn't who you keep. It's what you carry, and what you refuse to inherit. I pressed the page to my chest. Her words weren't bitter. They weren't a call to arms. They were a reminder. A compass. The doorbell rang around noon. I wasn't expecting anyone. At the door stood a young man with a white envelope. He handed it to me, smiled politely, and walked away. The envelope bore the seal of the Hope and Haven Women's Shelter. I opened it at the kitchen counter, the same spot where so many battles had begun. Inside was a simple letter. Dear Ms. Hartwell. Your recent donation helped 3 women secure housing and safety. 2 of them are mothers. 1 is starting college. Thank you for seeing those we often overlook. The Hope and Haven team. It was the first time I'd been thanked in months. Not a performative thank you. Not a hollow social nicety. But real gratitude, for something I'd done quietly, with no expectation of recognition. I smiled. Not broadly. Not proudly. Just enough. Later that evening, the phone rang. Gloria's name lit up the screen. I answered with a tired, hi. You holding up okay, sweetheart? She asked gently. I leaned against the wall, fingers brushing the frame of the living room archway. I think for the first time, I am. She paused. You did the hard thing. The right thing. Your grandma would be proud. I didn't respond. My throat closed for a second. I swallowed, nodded to no one. Thank you. I'll drop by next week, she added. Bring those lemon bars you like. We can sit and not talk about any of this. I'd like that. We said our goodbyes. I hung up, placed the phone on the table, and stood there a moment longer. When night fell, I walked outside. The porch light buzzed quietly, a sound I used to find annoying. Now, it was just life humming in the background. In my coat pocket was a photo. The original version had all of us, Vera, Lowell, Callista, even and Indira. I'd kept it not because I wanted to remember them, but because it reminded me of who I used to be. Now, it was just me. I'd cropped the others out, not in malice, but in truth. I pinned it to my vision board in the hallway office. Beside it, a card I'd scribbled in black marker weeks ago. Start fresh, but never forget. I didn't need revenge. I didn't need applause. I needed clarity. And now, I had it. The house wasn't louder without them. It was just more honest. As I stood in the doorway looking out at the quiet street, a breeze tugged at the hem of my sweater. I left the door open. Sometimes, the ones we love the most are the ones who expect us to stay silent the longest. But silence doesn't mean weakness, and boundaries aren't betrayal. What would you have done in Freya's place? Have you ever been made to feel like a guest in your own home? Let me know in the comments. I read every single one. And if stories like this speak to you, don't forget to